Good morning, 10 o'clock on the East Coast. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Alex Livingston.
And I'm Rob Nelson. Take a look at this video right now at the top of the hour from the Cajun Navy. Those are volunteers who are now delivering aid by mule to those stuck in western North Carolina. That's how dire things have become. That's how many roads have been wiped out. The mules are now bringing supplies to folks in desperate need in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Efforts, as you can imagine, are ongoing and probably will be for weeks, if not months, if not years. Hundreds of road closures combined with major cell and internet outages are making everything infinitely more difficult still. Days after the storm passed, Helene now officially has claimed the lives of at least 130 people, and most officials do sadly expect that number to rise.
Vice presidential candidates J.D. Vance and Tim Walz will take center stage tonight in what's likely to be the last debate of the 2024 campaign. The debate moderators will not fact check in real time, but viewers can scan a QR code to learn the truth about the candidates' claims.
45,000 dock workers went on strike at midnight. The labor dispute is shutting down ports from Maine to Texas. It's all about money. It typically is, and also concerns by workers about the threat posed to their jobs and job security by automation. Economists are warning of possible product shortages and more inflation if this strike does drag on for some significant amount of time. The impact on the overall U.S. economy up to $7.5 billion every single week this thing goes on.
Mr. President, on behalf of the entire Biden family and the American people, happy 100th.
The nation's oldest ever sitting president sending birthday greetings to its longest living president as he reaches the century mark. Former President Jimmy Carter will mark his 100th birthday at home in Plains, Georgia, where he has been in hospice care since February of 2023.
I just want to pause for a moment here.
Yes.
And think about the totality of news that we are dealing with here. You have this extraordinarily devastating scene playing out in North Carolina. You have what could be a real economic hit to the country with this port strike. You have nothing but an escalating situation in the Middle East, including reports from the AP minutes ago that Iran is about to attack Israel with ballistic missiles, according to a U.S. Official here. It does, and of course the debate tonight, the election a month away. Right. It just feels like we're boiling a lot as a country in a lot of ways.
Of something.
Yes, in many ways. So a lot to get to say the least, and stick with the news today and for weeks to come. There's a lot. Our top story this hour: Helene has just caused indescribable damage across the southeast. It is one of the deadliest storms to hit America in more than 50 years. At this hour, the death toll stands at least 130 people across 6 states. Again, that number tragically only expected to go higher as hundreds are still unaccounted for.
At least 56 of those deaths are in North Carolina, Asheville being hit the hardest. Around the area, rescue missions are ongoing, but it's really a difficult task because hundreds of roads are closed and there's limited internet and cell service. We've been trying to get in touch with someone there for 2 days now, and we were not able to hear her very clearly over the phone. Volunteers are delivering supplies to isolated communities by mules, and I don't think any of us can really say we've seen that happen in person.
No, some of these areas are remote, and that's just the best way in. So many roads are just no longer there. We have team coverage this morning. Meteorologist Scott Withers keeping track of all those power outages and the forecast for today. National correspondent Dan Grossman is on the ground in devastated Asheville, North Carolina, otherwise beautiful tourist area in the western corner
this time of year
of that state. Yeah, right now, the start of fall. Dan, what are you seeing? How are folks making out right now?
Guys, it's tough to say the least. Every direction that you turn, you discover something new that really shows the level of devastation. I want you to take a look right next to me here. This is grass that was uprooted by sheer force of the amount of rushing water. You see just how bent a lot of these tree limbs are. You can see street signs that are nearly completely horizontal to the ground. The Swannanoa River, which runs right through Biltmore Village, which is where we're located, swelled to 26.5 feet. That beat its previous record by more than 6 feet. And I was telling you, every direction you turn can show you kind of a new mark as to how devastating this destruction was. You could see the mud line on this driveway. It might not look like much, but you pretty much make a direct line across the landscape, and that's how high the water is. You can see the discoloration on the bricks on the side of this building. The lower part of that, the darker part, that was all completely submerged. The cars underneath it completely submerged as well. And then as we pan to the left, you could just imagine this entire area in Biltmore Village under that much water. You can clearly see this silo that is not supposed to be there in front of you. There's debris on trees. The roads are muddy, and you can clearly see the destruction that's outside. We wanted to show you what it did to some of the buildings inside. This is a business that was locally owned. We just spoke to one of the managers. He allowed us to take a look on the inside just to see what it looks like. This is all the mud they have shoveled out from one of these rooms, and we're going to take a short look inside to see just what this amount of rushing water can do. You mentioned how clear it was on the outside, but you can see this basically went all the way up to the roof, completely destroying everything inside. This is just one business. Scenes like this playing out in so many homes as well. One of the mayors in a nearby town spoke about some of the rescue efforts that they're dealing with in the aftermath of Helene.
A lot of people have been excavated and are safe, evacuated, and that's the most important thing. We can rebuild the stuff, we can rebuild the buildings, we can replace things, but we can't replace the people.
We've got some firefighters, their families have gone to different locations and where they can just come here and work. There's a lot of responders, public works, our water resources that are all standing on the front lines that are personal sacrifices that are making this happen.
You think about that personal sacrifice. So many of these first responders, Good Samaritans, they're people who are going through the exact same thing as the people who are struggling. Supplies. We were in Greenville, South Carolina yesterday, about 45 minutes south of here. The lines for water, for supplies, for gas especially, out the door. There was one grocery store that had a line winding around the side of it. Many of them have come from North Carolina to be able to get some supplies. Buncombe County, which is where Asheville is located, reported more than 11,000 people wanting wellness checks on loved ones. Neighboring Mitchell County said that they have more than 200 missing persons reports on their hands. So the cleanup here is just one effort. That search and rescue mission going to go on for quite some time as well.
All right, national correspondent Dan Grossman, thank you. Of course, the region is still dealing with widespread power outages. Senior meteorologist Scott Withers keeping track of the numbers for us and, of course, the weather that's expected today. Good morning, Scotty.
Yeah, Alex, there is some good news. Check a look at the map here. Not a lot of rain, a little bit of sprinkles, and then it's going to move out. This cold front moving through. You look how clear that is. Going to dry everything out. That's what they need so they can get in there and clean out, but also so all those rivers and everything can drop down. Take a look. 1.6 million customers. That's a couple million people, to be honest, from the Florida Gulf Coast all the way up to West Virginia. That area hit the hardest. That includes Asheville right up in there, South Carolina and Georgia. It's going to take a long time to get that all on. Out on the West Coast, we're dealing with a high pressure dome right there off the Pacific. What it's doing, though, pushing a whole bunch of hot air inland all the way to New Mexico. From Albuquerque to Oregon, you are at 15 to 20 degrees above normal. This area right here, San Fran down to Phoenix, record level temperatures today and again tomorrow. That's why we got these heat alerts. The pink that you see everywhere, that's all of our excessive heat warnings. That's dangerous, and that's also where we see all of their heat health risks from the National Weather Service. You can see there San Francisco, also Phoenix. You need to be very careful. Stay hydrated today. Look at these temperatures. From Northern California, Redding, all the way down to Phoenix and Tucson, above 100 degrees today. It is October 1st. It's 92 out there in San Francisco, 87 in Los Angeles. You're going to feel it all across the southern tier. We got that summer still hanging on, but the northern tier of the country looks good. Up here in New England, through the Great Lakes, 60s and 70s into the upper plains, finally cooling down there. Billings almost getting to 80, and then at Seattle 65, and then it starts warming up back out there. But the big issue, as always, you can see that there. Those are those temperatures. All of this green, that is the flooding rivers that we still have active flooding situations. But the other story we have to focus on is the danger for about 36 million people, you guys, out there on the West Coast. October 1st, never thought I'd be saying we've got an excessive heat warning today for tens of millions of people.
All right, senior meteorologist Scott Withers. Thank you, Scotty.
Developing this morning, U.S. dock workers have now officially hit the picket line. Nearly 45,000 union members all across the East and Gulf Coasts are on strike right now after failed contract negotiations. The strike is expected to have a major economic impact.
National correspondent Jamal Andrus joins us now with the latest. Hey, Jamal, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Dozens of dock workers that have been out here since 5, 6 in the morning with tents, RVs, signs that say things like no contract, no work, and machines don't have families, corporate greed versus working families. And this is a strike that at this point shows no signs of slowing up. This is just a fraction of the nationwide coordinated strike that the International Longshoremen's Association is carrying out to demand higher wages and an end to automation in many cases on these ports across the country. As you can see, this thing carries out all the way up and down the East and Gulf Coast from Maine to Houston, Texas. Again, if you look at that map, some of the big cities there, Boston, New York, New Jersey, Baltimore, Tampa, Miami, and here in Houston in particular, you have an extraordinarily large port, the largest in the country if we're talking about sheer overall tonnage. 247 million tons of cargo come through here each year, and all of that coming to a screeching halt, potentially to the tune of $5 billion per day. As I mentioned, the International Longshoremen's Association demanding higher pay and protections from automation. They want things like cranes, gates, and container moving trucks to be manned by people rather than machines. An update on those contract negotiations, though, and again, this comes from the United States Maritime Alliance, which represents these ports across the country and their operators and owners. They said they made an offer to increase wages by nearly 50%, triple employer contributions to employee retirement plans, and retain the current language around automation. And again, the president of the ILA saying all of that falls short. Now, President Biden actually has said that he is not going to step in here. He is going to let this strike play out. But again, considering the election is right around the corner and you have potentially a $5 billion a day economic loss that could come as this strike continues. An expert I spoke to from the University of Houston says his absenteeism here is not going to last long. Listen.
The potential impact is so great and the geography is so great, and then the global context of this, that I think there will be insurmountable pressure on the Biden administration to get involved once we move into week 2, possibly.
Now, President Biden can step in with what's called the Taft-Hartley Act, which essentially allows for an 80-day cooling period where laborers go back to work and hopefully both sides come to the negotiating table. And that kind of, again, could potentially cool off what could end up being an extraordinary impact on the economic picture as we enter the 2024 election. Guys.
All right, national correspondent Jamal Andrus reporting. Thanks, Jamal.
All right, now to the campaign trail where both Tim Walz and J.D. Vance will battle it out on the debate stage tonight. It's the only scheduled vice presidential debate before the November election.
And to preview tonight's event, we're joined by Deputy Political Director Joe St. George. Joe, the final real major event before November 5th.
Absolutely, and I think, it's easy perhaps at the surface level to think of this as an undercard event, right? This event doesn't involve Trump, it doesn't involve Harris, but in a close election, everything matters. And this is a event that we know, just based off of history, is going to get a lot of eyeballs. Close to 60 million people watched the vice presidential debate in 2020. Even if this debate gets lower numbers than 4 years ago, it's still a significant event. And anything that could move an undecided voter in Michigan or in Georgia or in North Carolina is certainly impactful at this stage of the game. As far as the rules, 90 minutes, familiar format with no audience. That's been something that's been very familiar here in 2024 with the presidential debates. But unlike the presidential debates, the expectation is that we're going to hear a little bit more of the jabbing back and forth. CBS has indicated that microphones are going to remain hot unless they deem it necessary to mute a candidate's microphone. So that's something to keep an eye on. In this day and age, a lot of people are wondering about fact checking. How much will the moderators fact check the candidates in real time? CBS News has indicated that they will be less direct with their fact check. Instead, a QR code is expected to pop on the screen directing directing viewers to use their phone to access a real-time fact check as it is happening. So that's how we expect CBS News to handle this tonight. Remember, they're the hosts of this debate. They will then send out the signal so all the networks, including Scripps News, can broadcast it and then opine and analyze what happened during the debate after the debate concludes. Usually, this debate is sandwiched between two presidential debates, and as Rob pointed out, this may be the last big event. We have no indication that Trump and Harris are going to actually debate, so this could be, again, one of the last big events that an undecided voter watches, pays attention to before they ultimately cast their ballot. Guys?
All right, Deputy Political Director Joe St. George, thank you. And of course, you can watch the vice presidential debate right here on Scripps News tonight. We will be simulcasting the event at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Israel's military says that its troops have crossed into Lebanon, marking a significant escalation in its conflict with Hezbollah. Well, the latest on the fighting coming up.